Suddenly, a scream erupted from outside our trailer. It was Harry, the animal tamer.
The tigers are loose! The tigers are loose!
Dad ran out of the trailer and Mom looked at my brother and I.
Don't step foot out of this trailer until your father and I return.
Craig and I nodded, and as soon as Mom left, I locked the trailer behind me. For 20 minutes, screams and chaos filled the air as Craig and I huddled helplessly inside. Finally, there was a knock on the door, followed by Mom's voice. Craig swung the door open. When I saw the dreadful look on Mom's face, every muscle in my body tensed.
Kids, something happened to your father.
Hi, my name is Lori. I grew up in a beautiful town in Estonia. Do you want to hear more of my story? Then please like and subscribe. My older brother and I were third-generation circus folk. Circus life was the only life we knew, and we loved it. The sights, the smell, the applause, the big tent. It's like having a movie full of fun, excitement, and adventure. But the day the tigers escaped brought my family to its knees. I was 10 years old when the 2 tigers were let loose. Dad's leg got injured while trying to recapture the animals, and he was bedridden for weeks. After the incident, Mr. Top Hat, the leader of our circus group, was forced to close his circus, and my family, like many others, had no choice but to look for jobs outside. Luckily, Mom had inherited a house from Grandma which we moved into. With its dingy walls, broken window panes, and leaking roof, it became home, and we all adjusted to our new lifestyle.
Mom! Dad! We're home!
Hello, children. How much today?
We only made $50 today.
Craig handed over the money.
Sorry we couldn't bring in more.
Craig, you and Laurie are doing great. Mom squeezed his hand gently. Our life soon became a mundane routine, where Craig and I hit the streets from sun-up to sundown to bring in money, while Mom stayed home and took care of Dad. Few years passed, and the streets weren't kind to Craig and I. We were heckled and ridiculed by passers-by. One time, while we were performing, this kid approached us.
My mom says you're just dumb circus folk.
What did you say? I barely managed to hold Craig back from beating the kid up. Later, I took Craig to a store where we bought a tiny bottle of Pepsi and a bag of chips to treat ourselves. Craig, this is just for a time. It isn't forever.
Well, it seems like forever. I'm tired of getting up so early and not reaping any benefits.
The shopkeeper rang up our purchase and we exited the store. I watched as Craig pulled a bar of chocolate from his knapsack. Craig, where did you get that from?
Like I said, I'm tired of not reaping any benefits, and you better not tell Mom and Dad.
I didn't know what to think. I hoped Craig wouldn't lose his way too far. That evening, Mom, Dad, and Craig had a huge argument. Of course, I told my parents what Craig did. Craig glared at me.
You little snitch!
I'm sorry, Craig, but... He stormed out of the house, ignoring my words. Our relationship was never the same after that. One night, while watching the news reporter stated that there was yet another robbery around lunchtime. Over the past few weeks, masked clowns had committed numerous robberies in different parts of the country. Mom, they did it again!
This afternoon, the masked criminals escaped with a hefty sum of $10 million from a bank.
Suddenly, rapid bangs were heard on the front door.
Open up! This is the police!
My eyes widened as Mom calmly moved towards the door and opened it. Craig came out of the bedroom.
What's going on?
The officer ignored Craig and spoke to Mom.
Ma'am, this is a warrant to search your premises. We have reason to believe that your son was a part of the masked clown robberies.
4 police officers stepped into the house and began their search. After a few minutes, one of the officers shouted,
"Boss, I've got something!"
The officer stepped out of Craig's bedroom with a clown mask in his hand.
I found it in his cupboard in a secret compartment.
I felt sick to my stomach as handcuffs were placed on Craig. Mom wailed after Craig as he was dragged to the police car, kicking and screaming.
I didn't do anything! I didn't do anything!
Mom went to the police station while I stayed home with Dad. Without Craig, I had to find another way to earn cash to feed my family. While walking home one night, I noticed a random orchard close to our house. It was huge, with tons of fruit trees just sitting there. No one was around. I shrugged. Had to feed my family. Without Craig to help with our bigger performances, I wouldn't be able to earn any money. I climbed into the garden easily with my acrobatic skills, then started to climb up a tree. An unfamiliar voice called up into the tree.
Hey! What are you doing up there?
Startled, I fell out of the tree with a thud. When I opened my eyes, a boy, who looked about 2 years older than I was, peered down at me. His brown, beautiful eyes were filled with concern as he extended a hand to me. He helped me up but didn't let go of my hand once I was on my feet.
So, what are you doing here?
Nothing. I was just leaving. I tried to pull away from him, but he held on tight.
Maybe you'd like to tell the police what you're doing here.
He pulled out his phone from his pocket. Fine. He introduced himself as Wayne, and after I told him about my pitiful life story, I looked up at him. So, are you gonna call the police or not? Wayne shook his head.
I have a better idea. How about you come to work for my dad on the orchard, but you have to promise you won't steal from us.
So, when do I start?
You can start now.
As days passed, Wayne taught me everything I needed to know, and we spent a lot more time together. I loved working on the orchard too. It wasn't hard work, and at the end of the day, they usually let us bring home fruits that were too ripe to be sold. One afternoon, while at the mall, a girl ran up to Wayne and threw her arms around his neck.
Wayne!
She removed her arms from around his neck, but used her finger to trail his chest while I clenched my fists at my sides.
Madison!
Wayne said awkwardly, and he stepped back from Madison's grip. Madison glanced at me and scrunched up her nose before she turned her focus back onto Wayne.
I see that you're still into charity cases. Which homeless shelter did you pick this one out of?
I rushed at Madison, but Wayne held me back before I could swing at her.
Thank you for reminding me why we broke up. You're cruel and obnoxious. Laurie is a very good friend of mine. Now, if you'll excuse us.
Wayne held my hand and we walked away. You sure know how to pick him, don't you? Wayne laughed heartily.
How about we do a bit of shopping?
That night, after I came home from an amazing day with Wayne at the mall, where he purchased new clothes and shoes for me, he called me frantically.
We have a problem at the orchard. My dad's office is there, and $100,000 was stolen. We were supposed to use that money to upgrade our machinery.
Was anyone injured? Did the cameras pick up anything?
Everyone is fine, but the cameras were deactivated somehow. With a big hit like that, we may have to lay off a few workers. Dad's calling me, so I'll call you tomorrow.
The phone went dead. Over the next few days, many workers were laid off. And as it turned out, including me, I was so upset with Wayne. I stopped speaking to him. Couldn't he have put in a word to his dad about keeping me? He was too privileged and spoiled to even know how much I needed this job. So, I went back to stealing from orchards again. One afternoon, while I was walking around selling the stolen fruit, Wayne walked up to me.
Laurie, I came to apologize. I wish I could have helped.
If you wanted me to keep my job, you would have made sure I kept it.
The decision wasn't mine to make.
Don't worry your pretty little head over me. Us charity cases know how to survive.
I walked away. About 2 months later, Mom and I sat in the courtroom as they read the verdict of my brother's trial. His lawyer told him that if he pleaded guilty, they'd lower his sentence. Craig pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 5 years of hard labor in a maximum prison. After the sentencing, Mom went home still shaken and I went on a walk. When I looked up, I realized that I was standing in front of Wayne's orchard. I sighed heavily and began to walk away.
Laurie, wait up!
Wayne called. I stopped and turned.
I'm glad you're here.
He smiled. I tried to smile back, but instead I burst into tears like a big baby. Wayne held me as I told him about Craig's sentencing.
Laurie, I know it doesn't feel like it now, but everything will turn out okay in the end. You can write and visit Craig. He needs your love and support even more now. It'll be okay.
After a while, I pulled away from Wayne's arms. I'm sorry I acted like such a jerk before. I know it wasn't your fault that I was fired. Wayne's eyes lit up.
I'm actually glad that you came by. My cousin, Paddy, just lost one of her waitresses. I'm sure she'd be happy to have you if you're looking for a job, he added quickly. Do you want me to give her a call?
I nodded. I waited as Wayne spoke with Paddy, and he gave me the thumbs up sign before he hung up.
The cafe is on the outskirts of town. I can pick you up at home and drop you to and from work every day.
I panicked. I didn't want Wayne to see my house. If he knew just how poor I was, then he may not want to hang out with me anymore. I'll meet you here. I wouldn't want to put you out of your way. I smiled nervously. Okay, great. I'll see you tomorrow. As promised, Wayne dropped me to and from work from the orchard. There was no way I was going to let Wayne see where I lived. Mom, however, didn't care if Wayne saw our dingy apartment because one afternoon I came home and there was Wayne sitting on the couch, chatting with Mom and Dad. Wayne, what are you doing here? Your mom gave me a call and invited me over for dinner. Mom! How could you? I can't believe you did this to me! I bolted to the bedroom and locked the door. Mom tried to coax me out, but I refused. How was I going to face Wayne? It was bad enough he thought I was a thief. I couldn't bear to think of how differently he'd treat me now, knowing that I lived in this dump. Over the next 2 weeks, I didn't return any calls or text messages from Wayne. One evening, after dinner, Mom sat next to me on the sofa and held my hand. Lori, why are you being so childish? Mom, it's just that... Lori, I'm sorry that I did such a bad job at raising you and your brother that you're ashamed of where you came from. But that boy cares about you. My mom got up and walked away. I watched her leave and realized she was right. If Wayne truly cared about me, he wouldn't mind the fact that I was very poor. The next day, I contacted Wayne and asked him to meet me at the cafe during my lunch hour. I even picked a few flowers from the neighbor's yard and tied a red bow around them, as an apology. Hi, Wayne approached me. Hi, I stood and handed him the flowers. I'm sorry about the way I acted. I was just embarrassed. You have nothing to be embarrassed about, and I'm the one who should apologize. I should have asked you first if it was okay to come. I'm sorry. We were sitting so close. I could feel his breath on my skin. Then suddenly, Wayne leaned over and kissed me. My face grew cherry red as he pulled apart. I've been waiting to do that since the first day I met you. For the next hour, Wayne and I enjoyed a large pizza and great conversation. After lunch, I walked Wayne to the door and he promised he'd pick me up after work. When I got home that night, Mom told me that Mr. Top Hat, our ex-circus leader, had visited her and offered her a job at his new circus he'd opened up. So what are you going to do? It's a job not as glamorous as being an acrobat, but it'll help with the bills. Mom was in charge of collecting the tickets from patrons. If you want to do it, I'll support you fully. I hugged Mom. I took only morning shifts at work so Mom could work nights. Some nights, Wayne even came home to hang out and help me with Dad. Shortly after Mom came home one night, Mr. Top Hat stormed into our house unannounced. When I saw the angry look on his face, I immediately texted Wayne that I needed him here now, then went to face the angry man. What are you doing here? Where is she? Where is that trifling wretch? Mr. Top Hat, what is the meaning of all this? Mom stepped out from the bedroom. You set my tent on fire! What? Why would I do such a thing? This is payment for what happened to your husband all those years ago, isn't it? Mr. Top Hat advanced towards Mom, and I forced myself between them. Leave! Now! And who's going to stop me, little girl? You! No! Wayne placed his hand on top of Mr. Hat's shoulder and spun him around. I will! Mom and I watched, speechless, as Wayne punched Mr. Top Hat in the face. They both fought, and a few minutes later, the police arrived and escorted Mr. Top Hat away. Wayne stayed a few minutes before he left, and I walked him to his car. Thank you for coming. It meant a lot to me and my family. I wrapped my arms around his neck and pulled him into a passionate kiss. I'll see you tomorrow, okay? I smiled up at him once we pulled away. He nodded and hopped into his car and drove off. 5 years later, Mom and I stood in front of Craig's jail. Today was the day he'd be walking out as a free man. Mom! Lori! Craig ran over to us and hugged us. Finally, my family is reunited. Your father is waiting for us at home. Let's go.
Welcome home, son.
Dad greeted Craig from the sofa as we walked into the house. We laughed and talked as we caught up on what had happened over the past 5 years. Okay. Now it's time to get to the best part. Dad stood up and rubbed his hands together. We all walked into their bedroom and moved the bed and the floorboards below. Dad removed a duffel bag and opened it. Remember when I said that my brother and I were third-generation circus folk? We were also third-generation thieves. Allow me to explain. Everything I've been telling you up until this point has been a lie. Well, in terms of how honest my family and I have been. When the tigers escaped, my parents saw an opportunity to finally escape the circus life, which until that point, they had been tied to contract with Mr. Top Hat. Dad pretended to be injured. After, we were desperate to earn money, so my family and I became the masked clowns and stole money. After the $10 million heist, we knew we had to feed the police something to appease their appetite, and so Craig took the fall and accepted all the blame so me, my mom, and my dad could walk free. Oh yeah, and if you must know, I also stole the $100,000 from Wayne's orchard. And my mom did burn down Mr. Top Hat Circus, just 'cause she felt like it. I guess you could say my family and I are a little crazy. Suddenly, the door opened to the bedroom. We spun around quickly.
Hey, I tried the doorbell, but no one answered. And,
Wayne's eyes went to Dad and then to the money.
I think I may have caught you guys at a bad time.
Wayne turned on his heels and darted out of the room.
Craig, get him!
In a flash, Craig and Dad followed Wayne into the living room. I watched as they both quickly subdued him, tied him up, and gagged him.
We've come too far to be caught now.
So what are we going to do? We have to get rid of him.
But Mom, we can't. I love him. He's not going to keep our secret, Lori. This has to be a unanimous vote.
All in favor, show by a raise of hands. Mom raised her hand, followed by Dad's and Craig's raised hand. I looked at Wayne, then at my family. I slowly raised my hand. We moved towards him as Wayne's muffled screams filled the house.
Yeah!
I urged the horse on as we galloped away from the bandits chasing me.
Get back here!
I held the small treasure chest in my hands closer to me.
You'll never get my treasure!
The bandits soon overtook me and circled around me. One of them moved closer, scaring my horse and causing him to rear back.
Whoa! There, boy!
I lost my grip of the chest and it fell to the ground.
No! Ha ha! The treasure's mine!
But before the bandit could get his grimy hands on my treasure, I brought out my lasso and looped it around the chest, dragging it back into my hands. We galloped away, speeding far from those evil bandits. I found this treasure fair and square. All they wanted to do was steal it from me. Suddenly, I heard a loud ringtone. Someone was calling me. I held the reins of the horse and the chest in one hand, then swiped to answer my phone with the other. Hello?
Bianca!
What's up? Who is this?
Antonio!
Oh, hi, bud. Listen, I'm kind of busy right now.
You're gonna wanna hear this. You remember the precious ruby skull we thought was only a myth?
Yes?
Well, it's not a myth, Bianca. It's real. Some of my guys found a map that seems legit. I think this is it. Our dream come true.
Send me the location. I'll be there soon. I hung up and dropped the treasure chest on the ground. You can keep the treasure, I called back to the chasing bandits. I found something much better. We rode all the way to my personal plane that I had parked out in the desert. I dismounted my horse. Go on, boy. Be free. The horse seemed to nod and strutted off. I boarded the plane, started up the engines, and was already off on my way to Antonio. Howdy, y'all. My name's Bianca. Please like and subscribe. Growing up, my life was pretty sad. I was an orphan in this rotten orphanage. I thought my life would be miserable for the rest of my life. Until one special day. When I was 8 years old, I was in the backyard of the orphanage playing with some tin cans.
Come on, brother. Let's go find the treasure. Oh no! Look out! A booby trap!
I heard the gate open and an old man walked in. He was very old, but I could tell that he was handsome once. And probably fit. I couldn't stop staring at the big hat on his head. I was mesmerized by it.
Who are you?
The man looked at me. The name's Joe.
Joe? That's a funny name.
The man chuckled. I suppose it is. What's your name?
Bianca.
The man looked at my tin cans. What's up with these guys?
They're explorers.
You like to explore?
Yes.
I looked down.
But I'll never become an explorer. The old man seemed to be thinking. Then finally, he knelt beside me, and I felt a slight pressure as he placed his hat on my head. Here, keep this. My time for adventure is over, but yours is just beginning. My eyes widened. Really? Yes. Don't give up, kid. Never give up. Adventure is waiting for you. You just gotta go look for it. He smiled, stood up, then left as suddenly as he'd appeared. I always remember that day, because it was the day when I became certain I would find adventure in my life. Antonio had been an orphan too, and when I told him about my meeting with Joe, he'd been super excited as well. Let's be explorers!
Yes, we'll be explorers together.
There was one particular treasure that we both dreamed of finding. We discovered the treasure in an old book at the local library.
The Ruby Skull. An ancient treasure left behind by an ancient tribe called the Lamocas. Antonio, we have to find it. We must.
Years passed, and after I left the orphanage, I worked hard and saved enough money to book a flight to the Amazon. And that was where I stumbled upon the first ever treasure I would find in my career as an explorer. It was exhilarating when I opened up that chest to find hundreds of gold coins. Since then, I've found much more treasure. But as soon as Antonio called to say he might know where the Ruby Skull is, I soon forgot about all the other treasure. This was it, my dream adventure. I steered the plane over to the location Antonio had sent me. I slowly descended and spotted Antonio and some other people waving from a clearing. I landed the plane, and as soon as I got off, Antonio crushed me in a hug. Bianca, old friend, it's been too long. Way too long, brother. I see you still have Joe's hat. I nodded. Of course. I'll keep it forever. I smiled, then glanced at the other two people. Who is this? These are my good friends, Macy and Charles. They're both explorers as well. I figured we could use their help. Sure. Macy didn't even smile. She just nodded, then glanced away. What was her problem? Charles, on the other hand, gave me a beaming smile and bowed. I've heard a lot about you, Bianca. You're a legend amongst us explorers. I grinned. You hear that, Antonio? I'm a legend. Yeah. Antonio chuckled. Okay, guys. Are we ready? We all nodded. The entrance is this way. Antonio led us over to the entrance to an ancient ruin, what must have been an old temple. We walked down the staircase that led far underground. I brought out my torch as I peered around at the old stone and small engravings on the walls. It's so dark down here. We entered a small, empty room. What now? I started to wander around, when suddenly I heard a crunch and looked down to see a broken jar. Oops! What are you doing? Suddenly, the whole world seemed to shake, and we looked up in panic to see the exit closing up. Within seconds, we were trapped underground. Great! Just perfect! Now we're trapped! I'm sorry, guys, but don't worry. Maybe this was supposed to happen. Maybe I thought you were a legend. Clearly the legends were false. Because you're nothing but a lousy explorer. Hey, leave her alone! Charles went to stand by my side. She tried her best. Guys, please. Oh, so now you're on her side. Fine, be that way. Macy stormed off, only to sit down in the far corner of the room. It would have been rather hilarious if we weren't in such a dangerous situation. If we didn't find a way out, we'd die from starvation very soon. Why don't we look for clues? Maybe Bianca's right. Maybe this was supposed to happen. We all spread out. Well, except for Macy, who chose to sit and brood, and started to search for clues. I was walking along, inspecting the engravings on the walls, when I discovered a symbol I had seen before. I remembered. On the back cover of the book from the library, the book about the Ruby Skull, this had been on the cover. Guys, come look! Everyone gathered around me as I nervously pressed on the symbol. Then, like magic, the symbol glowed a bright red, and a huge section of the wall slid back to reveal another room, bigger than the previous one, with beds, food, and water.
Looks like this is our resting point. It would be good to take a break and a little nap. Nice work, Bianca. I winked at Charles and he blushed. Macy pushed through and shoved Charles aside before plopping down on one of the beds. Yeah, nice work, I suppose. I barked a laugh at Macy and winked at her too. Was it just me or did she blush even more than Charles did? Pretty soon, we all went to sleep. But when I woke up a few hours later, I got the shock of my life. Antonio was missing. Antonio? Where are you? Where could he have gone? There's only 2 rooms. Do you think he found a secret pathway? No, he wouldn't have left us behind. Maybe someone took him. Who? The curse of the ruby skull. Is that even real? Maybe. Ugh, honestly, you're not being helpful right now. While those two continued bickering, I started to search Antonio's bed, where I found a note under his pillow. Guys, stop fighting! Come look at this! Tentatively, they gathered around me as we read the note. Miss him? Follow the clues to find your treasure. Clue number 1. No one can hear you down here, except, of course, for the doors. The doors? What does that mean? I sat there silently for a few minutes, thinking. Bianca, what are you thinking? I'm thinking... Guys, just follow my lead. And then, out of nowhere, I began screaming loudly. As loud as I could. Macy and Charles stared at me as if I had lost my mind, which I guess was understandable seeing how I was acting very weird. Come on, guys, just trust me. I screamed again, louder and louder, and I saw Macy shrug, then scream with me. Charles was more hesitant, but finally he relented and joined us in our screaming performance. 30 seconds passed and nothing had happened. But then suddenly there was a grinding noise and a giant rock moved to reveal a small tunnel, just big enough for us to crawl through. Yes! We did it! Macy squealed in excitement. Bianca, you're a genius! She hugged me and I stood there awkwardly. That was okay, I guess. Charles looked at us. That was strange. Come on, guys! Let's find Antonio! We crawled into the tunnel and crawled for what seemed like ages, until finally we emerged into a giant cavern. There was what looked like a bridge leading downhill. On either side of the bridge, there was darkness. I had no idea how far the drop was. Right at the entrance to the tunnel was a single skull that had giant ruby jewels in its eye sockets. Is this the ruby skull? No, it can't be. It's too easy. Let me see. Wait, Charles, don't! Too late! Charles lifted the skull, and instantly it dissolved into dust. We heard a loud, thundering boom, and suddenly behind us, a wall crumbled to reveal a giant ball of stone, heading straight for us. Run! We took off at full speed. Charles and Macy dove out of the way and avoided being squished, but when I leapt, my foot slipped and I went tumbling over the side. Luckily, I managed to grab hold of a protruding rock just in time, but I was quickly losing my grip. Help! Someone grabbed hold of my hand. I looked up, expecting to see Charles, but it was Macy. Hold on! She let out a cry and dragged me up and back to safety. I fell over and landed on top of her. We stared at each other for a while. Macy had just saved my life. This is awkward. I hurriedly stood up, moving away from Macy. I felt my face warm. Was I blushing now? We should get going. Yeah, sure. I led the way down the bridge, but just when I thought we'd gotten through the worst of it, we emerged into another room, a giant cavern with a raised throne. Antonio sat on the throne with a crown on his head. Antonio! At first, I was happy to see him, but when I moved to embrace him, he didn't budge. Oh, you're alive. Huh? You're supposed to be dead. Antonio? What are you talking about? Ugh! For once, can you just fail? Is that too much to ask? I don't understand. Macy stepped forward, understanding on her face. He set us up. He wanted us to get killed. What? You never found the ruby skull, did you? Antonio smiled evilly. Nope. Antonio! But why? Antonio turned eyes of hatred to me.
Is it not obvious?
Are you seriously too thick in the head to know why? We grew up together. We dreamt of being explorers together.
Oh, yes, we did. And now we are explorers.
Except whenever I get around to finally finding the treasure, I only discover that you've already stolen it. You've taken over the treasure hunting industry, Bianca. You have to be eliminated. I didn't know. I don't care about the treasure. If you wanted it, you should have just asked. I only care about adventure. Ha! You really expect me to believe that? Yes! Enough of this! It's time to take you out once and for all!
Antonio raised a bow and arrow, hid him behind the throne. He looked me in the eyes.
Goodbye, Bianca.
Ah! Antonio pulled back the arrow. I was going to die! But then, out of nowhere, Macy appeared, leaping in front of me, shielding me with her body.
No!
The arrow streamed towards us, but my body moved of its own accord. And suddenly, my whip flickered out and hit the arrow away in midair. I didn't even know I was capable of doing that. Antonio howled.
Curse you, Bianca!
Suddenly, the whole cave started to shake.
The whole place is gonna go down!
We have to get out of here!
Grab hold of me!
I swung my lasso and aimed for an opening above where I could see daylight. By a miracle, the lasso caught hold of something, and Macy, Charles, and I all climbed up the rope. The whole place was truly falling to pieces now. I looked back in and called out to Antonio.
My brother, please! Come! Get out of there!
No! He looked very sad then. I'm sorry. Then a boulder fell over and Antonio disappeared. Bianca, come on! Reluctantly, I climbed up the rope and we all emerged above in the fresh air. We all caught our breath. Then I looked at Macy. She had leapt in front of me to save my life. Macy, you could have died. Why? Macy looked away. Yes? I like you, okay? Like me... what? I have a crush on you! My cheeks reddened. Oh.
What?
I don't know if you feel the same way, but... No! I took a deep breath, then grabbed hold of her hand. I would love to go on a date with you. Macy smiled in relief. Charles, meanwhile, looked as confused as ever. Okay, out of everything we've experienced today, that's the most shocking thing. Oh, shut up. I laughed too, but then I looked back to the entrance of the underground caves. Antonio was gone. I was sad, but I guess it was better this way.
Hi, my name is Lucy and I'm from Florida. Please like and subscribe. My parents are super rich. We own a huge mansion and I can basically get whatever I want, whenever I want. I had everything. Well, except popularity. I was probably the least popular kid in my class growing up. I was always picked last in team games and no one wanted to speak to me. I remember on my 15th birthday, my parents had invited everyone in my class to our mansion, and I know the only reason they came was because they knew the party would be amazing since we were so rich. I wanted to impress everyone, so I wore my favorite Hello Kitty dress. As I walked down the stairs, they all stared at me. I was flattered they were so speechless by the sight of me. But then, one of them screamed,
Ew! What are you wearing?
Everyone laughed. I turned bright red.
Yeah, Hello Kitty. More like Hello Brittany.
Everyone laughed, and I was about to run back to my room when one boy jumped out in front of everyone.
Hey, leave her alone. I think she looks beautiful.
Everyone was shocked, because the boy who had defended me was Marco, the new kid in our class. He was so cute. Marco and I spent the rest of the evening together, and by the end of it, Marco had already asked me out on a date. Our first date was amazing. Turns out Marco's family was rich too, because he took me to this super expensive restaurant and bought me a diamond necklace afterwards. I was in love with him. He was so sweet and kind. The next day at school, I was walking through the hallway when I saw Marco. He had blonde hair today. He must have bleached it. It looked really good, and I was about to call out to him when suddenly He pressed himself against the girl he was chatting to and kissed her. I froze. My heart felt like it had literally broken in two. I turned around and cried all the way home. Marco kept calling me after that, but I always ignored him. Finally, one night he appeared at my house.
Brittany, please, hear me out.
No, I saw you kissing another girl.
That wasn't me.
Are you kidding me? I saw it with my own eyes.
No, look.
Marco stepped to the side and pulled someone next to him. I gasped. They were identical.
Hey, I'm Luke.
The other boy smiled. I finally understood. So, you're twins?
Well...
Marco grabbed another boy from the side and I gasped even louder. You're triplets?
Yeah, so listen, I didn't cheat on you. You saw Luke kissing someone, not me.
Luke grinned and winked at me. I blushed.
If it helps.
The other triplet, who I learned was called Adrian, spoke up.
We all have different hair colors, see?
I noticed that he was right. Marco had black hair, Luke had blonde hair, and Adrian had ginger hair. That was lucky. It would be easy to tell them apart now. Suddenly, my mom appeared at the door.
Honey, who are you talking to?
She froze and she looked at each of them. Marco and I continued dating. Adrian and I got along really well, and he actually became my best friend. I discovered that although the triplets were identical in looks, they had completely different personalities. Luke was a bad boy, Marco was the angel, and Adrian was the loyal type. One night, Marco appeared at my house randomly. Oh, hey, Marco.
Yeah, it's me, Marco.
Marco entered and we sat in my room for a bit. Then I leaned over and kissed him. He looked flustered. What's wrong? Marco took off the beanie he was wearing, revealing blonde instead of black hair. You're Luke?
I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner. But when you mistook me for Marco, I just went with it.
But why?
Because I think you're beautiful and I like you.
I couldn't even speak. I would be lying if I said I hadn't found Luke charming, but I was dating Marco. While I was thinking over all this, my mom entered the room.
Oh, am I disturbing something? No, I'm just leaving.
Luke looked at me.
Think about it.
He left.
What was that all about?
I explained everything to Mom. What should I do? Who should I pick? Mom thought about it.
I think you should pick Luke.
I was surprised by her answer. Really? Don't you think he's a little too bad for me?
No, I think he's perfect for you. You should definitely pick him.
Oh, okay. I trusted my mom, so I did what she said. I broke up with Marco and dated Luke. Marco was heartbroken and was so hard to do, but I guess my mom was right. Dating Luke was so fun and adventurous. I never knew what to expect. Luke and I arrived back at my house after riding on his bike all day across the street. We were in my room when we started hearing shuffling upstairs where my parents' room was. I hadn't realized anyone was home. Then we heard something crash and we rushed upstairs, thinking there were burglars. But what we saw was even worse. My mom was making out with Marco. Can you believe it? Mom, what are you doing? Marco and Mom broke apart. Marco! Marco was red with embarrassment. Mom was even more embarrassed. Is this why you told me to date Luke? So you could have Marco all to yourself?
Listen, honey, I didn't really see this coming either. Yeah, Lucy, it just sort of happened.
I don't care. When Dad arrived that night, I told him everything. He was so shocked and him and Mom fought all night. I didn't care. What Mom had done hurt me. My parents ended up getting a divorce. Mom moved out. I ended up breaking up with Luke too. I realized he didn't make the best boyfriend because even though he was fun and adventurous, he was also pretty disloyal. I didn't get back with Marco though, because that was a whole other level of weird now. He had kissed my mom. If I ever kissed him, I would always picture that. I was sitting in the backyard one day after school. I was so sad. I had no friends, no boyfriends, my parents were divorced, everything seemed terrible. But then I felt someone sit down next to me in the grass. I looked over. At first I thought it was Marco, but then I saw the ginger hair and realized it was Adrian.
how you holding up?
I sighed. I've been better.
Listen, Lucy, if you ever need anything, I'll always be here.
Adrian held my hand. I looked at him suddenly. Was this it? Had the answer been here all along? Adrian laughed nervously.
Why are you looking at me like that?
I gulped. Adrian, I think I like you. Adrian was speechless. Then he shook his head as if in a daze.
You... what?
I like you. Adrian ran his hand through his hair, then looked at me. He smiled.
You know, I've been dreaming of the day you'd finally say that. I've had a crush on you since forever.
I smiled. We kissed, and it was the happiest moment of my life. Adrian and I dated, and by far, it was the happiest relationship out of the 3 triplets. With Luke, it was spicy, but too unstable. With Marco, it was just nice, but too boring. But with Adrian, it was just right. I feel like Goldilocks. Life was good. Except for my divorced parents, but hey, you can't have everything. But then the good times, like all things, came to an end. Prom was approaching. I was expecting Adrian to ask me any day now. Finally, it seemed the time came. We were in the cafeteria and Adrian appeared with a huge board that had the words, "Will you go to prom with me?" written in bold.
Lucy, No!
Marco suddenly appeared. He had a teddy bear and flowers.
Lucy, please take me back! I never should have kissed your mom!
The crowd watching us all gasped in shock. What? Before Marco could finish, Luke drove into the building on his motorbike.
Hey Lucy, don't settle for these dimwads. Come to prom with me. Bro, you stay out of this. No, you stay out of this. You both better leave before I get mad.
Then they all started fighting. I couldn't even do anything. I was beyond shocked. At the beginning of this year, I would have never expected to find 3 hot guys fighting over me. While they were all fighting, I sneaked away, but as I was walking, I found Luke's phone on the ground. It was already open, and I saw that he had been messaging my mom. What could they possibly be talking about? I read through, and I felt my stomach drop. All of this, everything, it had all been set up. These are the messages I saw.
Luke, my daughter Lucy is very lonely and needs a boy like you to spice up her life. I will pay you $10,000 to date her, but you must date her all the way through to after prom. Wow, really? Awesome! But what's the catch? Smart boy. The catch is your brothers are fighting for her as well. Only one of you will receive the reward money. Good luck.
I was devastated. But then I realized it all made sense. The triplets must have lied when they said they were rich. When Marco had bought me that diamond necklace, he must have done it expecting to win the $10,000. That's the only reason why he spent the money. And Luke's motorbike? He must have just rented it out to win me over. But Adrian... oh, Adrian. The fact that he was dating me for some cash reward broke me the most. And my mom, how could she do this to me? I know she was trying to help me, but this wasn't the way to go. And why had she kissed Marco? I looked up and Adrian was approaching me.
Lucy, what?
He saw the phone and the messages. Tears were running down my face.
Lucy, please, it's not what you think.
I threw the phone at him. You jerk! I ran all the way home and didn't look back. But when I arrived home, I was met by another nightmare. My mom was there.
Hi, honey. Good news. Your dad and I are getting back together.
I hate you! Mom was shocked, but then understanding dawned on her face.
So, you found out.
How could you do this to me?
I did this for you. Oh, honey, you were so sad and lonely. I wanted to help because I love you.
No, Mom, this isn't love. I ran to my room. I told Dad about what Mom had done, and he kicked her out again. I cried all night. Suddenly, I heard knocking on my window. I went over to investigate and found Adrian hanging by the branch of a tree. Adrian?
Please let me in! I'm about to fall!
I hesitated but let him in. Now, get out.
Lucy, please! It's all a big misunderstanding. I didn't take on your mom's deal.
I'll never believe another word you say.
If you won't believe me, believe this.
Adrian showed me his phone. I read his messages with my mom, and sure enough, he was telling the truth. When my mom had offered him the money, Adrian had said,
That's a terrible thing to do to your daughter, and I won't be a part of it. But when I got to meet you and we spent more and more time together, I realized that I really do love you. My awful brothers are the ones taking advantage of you, not me. Please, Lucy, you gotta believe me.
I smiled and kissed him. Of course I believe you. Years passed. Adrian and I ended up getting married. On our wedding day, the priest gave his speech and said,
If anyone objects to this marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Suddenly, I saw two heads appear in the audience, Marco and Luke. My blood ran cold. Not again. But then someone else appeared. Mom. She hadn't been invited to our wedding, but she had shown up anyway. I thought she was gonna ruin everything, but she did something unexpected. She grabbed Luke and Marco by the ears and dragged them away so they couldn't object. I watched her go, and as she turned around to glance at me, I mouthed the words, "Thank you," to her. She smiled, nodded, and left.
You may now kiss the bride.
Adrian and I kissed, and I was so ready for this next chapter of my life.